Right, everyone, welcome back to the Promised Land podcast with me, Scott Saunders, talking all things Manchester United after Manchester United lose 2-0 at home to West Ham in the Premier League. They are 16th in the league. Tottenham, who are in the Europa League final with them, are a point behind and are in 17th in the league. That is going to be one hell of a night. But it's an interesting day because this was Man United falling behind at Old Trafford for the 12th time in the Premier League this season. Only Leicester have done so more often than that. And United obviously didn't recover on the day. They lost the game 2-0. Ruben Amorim absolutely furious. And a lot of the fallout from this has been Ruben Amorim's comments and what he said, because he's not pulled any punches at all. I'm going to be talking about what he said on this podcast today. What I have seen as well, and maybe it's the online perspective here, I'm not sure how match-going fans are feeling at the moment, but I can imagine that if you're paying your money, a lot of money, to go and watch this version, this dross that is Manchester United in the Premier League anyway, they're unbeaten in the Europa League, obviously, but going and watching this week after week, knowing it's going to be the same thing. I don't even get up for these games at the moment because I know I'm going to see the same thing every week. It is a lot of money to be spending on this. It is a pathetic excuse of a football team and a football club at the moment that is riddled with problems that have been long time in the making. And I understand that there are people who are looking at Ruben Amorim now and thinking that he is not up to the task. But a lot of what he said in his post-match press conference, I know some people want to see actions over words, but I think it's, I'll maybe establish my position on this in this podcast. And I do implore you, if you're on the other side and if you're thinking that Ruben Amorim isn't up to this job, please listen on, because I think it's so much deeper, this problem, than just beating West Ham on a Sunday or being 6th in the Premier League as opposed to 16th. It's much deeper than that. And it's going to require a hell of a lot of patience from a hell of a lot of people. And I'm going to try and convey my feelings and how I feel and how I've looked at this situation with Manchester United for a long time, for several years now. And looking back at what past managers have said, looking back at performances under previous managers, and knowing that the problems are so much deeper than just what the 11 that are out on the pitch and the manager that is stood on or sat on the bench or stood on the touchline. It is so much deeper than that. There are deep-rooted issues that need to be fixed, and Ruben Amorim has been communicating that ever since he got in the door. And I think the volume was turned up to 11 with what he said after this match today. But this is the Promised Land podcast. I'm going to be talking through a bit of the West Ham game, but you've seen it all before. You've seen it all before. Rasmus Højlund missing chances from point-blank range. United not really defending very well, going 1-0 down, no real reaction. You've seen it all before. You've seen an important player getting an injury ahead of an important game. Lenny Yoro limping off, fingers crossed his injury is not serious enough to keep him out of the Europa League final. But you just don't know. It looked pretty bad to me. He looked pretty distraught. So we'll be talking about that West Ham game and be getting into what Ruben Amorim has had to say in his post-match comments, because I think they're very important. It's probably going to be a story that is told throughout the rest of the week. I've already seen the media headlines of Amorim says he should be sacked or he will walk away if he can't fix this United problem, this kind of thing. And generally, I understand, like, if people are having their doubts about Ruben Amorim at the moment, it's completely fair and predictable. I don't think he's got everything right, but at the same time, I do fear and I do worry that people are falling into the same trap that we've fallen into over and over again. And I think if the issues that United have that are so deep-rooted are not addressed consistently over a period of seasons, they are never, ever, ever going to get out of the mess that they're in. And they are going to plunge further and further and further. Lower than this, maybe. I don't know. But United and Amorim is shouting and screaming for fundamental change to happen at Manchester United. And I have been I'm not the only person to have been saying this, but I know, and I know that there's a lot of people out there who know that fundamental change of how Manchester United are run and how they play is required, and it needs to happen. It needs to happen very quickly as well. And I think this summer will be, out of all the super important summers that have summered over the course of the last decade or 12 years, this is probably the most important one, because this is United's worst season in my life. I have never seen it as bad as this one. But subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify if you've not done so already. Please leave a comment. It's important because I think this is a pretty emotional situation, because United have lost 16 or 17 games. I've lost count now. And people are upset, and rightfully so. People are annoyed, and rightfully so. And people have their opinions. And I'd love to hear yours as well. But please get in touch with me as well on social media at @_ Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok, and also get in the comments of the Spotify and Apple shows. I'm not sure whether this one is on YouTube yet, but yes, please follow me and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So I'm going to run through very briefly a few of the issues that we saw in the game today. Probably one of the strongest teams that we've seen him name. Concerns that it might have been too strong, and knowing that Lenny Yoro has now gone off injured, clutching his foot and putting his head in his shirt and head in his hands, this kind of thing, you worry that he might end up missing the Europa League final. And should he have played the game, is something you can look at Ruben Amorim for and maybe point the finger, but also it's important to know that you can't just take every single player who's so important to this team that needs to play in the Europa League final. They can't just have a 2-week break. You know, you can play Victor Lindelof ahead of him, maybe, but you don't want to keep Lenny Yoro out of this game, out of the Chelsea game, and wrap him in cotton wool for the next game against Tottenham, because that's just too long a time to have between matches. It's having without a game for 2 weeks. You lose sharpness, and you need to keep sharpness. It's a very, very difficult balance for Amorim at the moment to balance everything, to know that he needs players fit and firing as they can be in this circumstance. But he also needs them rested as well. And it was a surprise that Nus Mazraoui started, given what Amorim said after the game the other day. But I think what you did see was Ahmad was back. You saw Bruno and Ugarte midfield. You saw Kobbie Mainoo in one of the 10s or in central midfield and getting on the ball. You saw Harry Amas and Luke Shaw in. And, you know, it was a strong team. It really was. And again, United didn't get the level of performance out of this team that everybody expects of them. They're now 16th, haven't won in 7 games in the Premier League. And let's be honest, they're probably not going to win a Premier League game this season. They're probably going to go 9 without a win in the Premier League, because you've got away to Chelsea, who Chelsea aren't great at the moment, but Chelsea are playing for something. They lost at Newcastle, and then Nottingham Forest dropped points. So Chelsea are going to be looking at that game and thinking, if we win that, we have a really good chance of qualifying for the Champions League. Aston Villa then play United after the Europa League final, themselves going for Champions League. And it could come down, they might need to win on the last day in order to get into the Champions League. And the United season will be over by then, because the Europa League will have finished. So I can't really sit here and say that United are going to win a game this season. They might lose both. There's a very good chance that they might lose both. And I think it's important to acknowledge that Amorim hasn't done everything right. He obviously hasn't. And he has come out publicly, effectively, and said the Premier League is not our priority at the moment. We need to win the Europa League for the sake of getting back into the Champions League, because that will help. Everybody knows the story by now. It will be more money for United to go and do the rebuild that we all know that they need to do. We all know that they need to do it. And it will give them more money and more flexibility to bring more players in. United aren't good enough to play in the Champions League at the moment, like Ruben Amorim has said, but it will definitely help them with the rebuild that we all know needs to happen. So when you come out and say something like that, the players know it too. It's just everybody knows it. Everybody knows it, but he's acknowledged it publicly. So given what we expect out of Ruben Amorim teams, or what Ruben Amorim expects out of his team, is for 100% effort, to fight for every ball, to put everything that you have into this game. Yet, is conversely on the other side, acknowledge publicly that Premier League games aren't as important as winning the Europa League, because that is simply what the season has boiled down to. And then he's come out and is effectively grilling the players for not giving 100% effort in this game, not fighting for every ball. It's probably he deserves some blame for that, but it's a difficult position that he's in. Although I suppose you could say at the same time that maybe he shouldn't have dragged United so far down in the table. Maybe he should have been a little bit more malleable and changeable in order to get the best out of the squad that he has. But he's choosing to die on his sword. He's always said he will play the way that he knows how. And the way that he knows how is, you can look at the system, you can look at the back three or the back five or the one-up striker and the two narrow tens, and you can say, well, he should change his system. But at the important thing, regardless of what the system is, the most important thing about Ruben Amorim's teams is effort, fitness, intensity, desire to win. He said in one of his first press conferences that he wanted his team to run like dogs. Do you remember this Manchester United team ever running like dogs? If you do, it was probably on a one-off occasion. The only real game I can think of where United played with the intensity that I think Ruben Amorim would want is that game at Anfield, which United drew 2-2 this season. They played other decent matches, but the Arsenal game where United won in the FA Cup, United were on the back foot for a lot of the time. They hung in there, they picked their moment to attack, and they got a result. They won on penalties. The City game, United weren't brilliant, but then they ended up winning with a late double. And Ahmad scored in the 90th minute or whatever it was. There've been other games in the Europa League where the intensity is lower. So maybe United's deficiencies in intensity and physicality don't show up as much because they're playing against teams that from leagues that require more or have more technical quality, or maybe the level is lower. You don't know. But what you can say about Premier League football is most teams in the Premier League are the fundamental requirements are physicality, fitness, winning duels, and all of this. And that is, you have to have that before anything else. United don't. And even that team today that you saw, or it would depend on when you listen to this, even that team doesn't have it. And what we need to see, really, is that change. We do need to see that change. The only way it will change is by personnel changes. I hate to say it, is more players again that needs to go, that need to stay, or that need to go, that need to come in, and this kind of thing. But you can know it's so important to know that how Ruben Amorim has established himself as one of Europe's best coaches. It's by following every single word that he utters to a T, by giving every single drop of what you have in every single game that you play in. This United squad can't do that at the moment. And that is why we're seeing a mesh of two complete opposites currently. United have built a squad that was for a certain system. But look, Erik ten Hag wanted more effort out of his players. Ended up running them into the ground. But, that's why I kind of stuck with him for so long, is because he always came out and said he wanted, he might have been protecting himself for a while, but what top managers want nowadays is effort underlined everything. That's the absolute fundamental requirement out of everything. We just don't get this out of a United team. And think of how long this has been the case. Rangnick failed with it. What was that football when Ralf Rangnick came in? One of the godfather of gegenpressing. What was that? That was a group of players that were not suited to high intensity, high effort football. We got whatever that was. Ollie got a tune out of the players, but that was based on making them feel good. And then eventually, I know there are plenty of people who look back on that era fondly, but eventually the players stopped and that didn't work anymore. You think back to the days of Louis van Gaal and Jose Mourinho, David Moyes. How long has this problem of, he said in his post match comments, how long have United had a lack of urgency? That was the word, they were the words he used today. And I'll talk about them in a second, just after the break. How long have this United team showed a lack of urgency for? Because I know personally, I've been writing about football and talking about football like for a job for over a decade. I started in football media in David Moyes' first year. So part of my jobs early on was to write about what I was seeing and in various different places. It's probably still out there on the internet somewhere. Talking about the fear factor of Old Trafford dissipating, talking about the lack of urgency from players disappearing. Still the case. It is still the case. It's down to failed recruitment. It's down to not having ideals. It's not down to not having a plan or changing your plan every 2 or 3 years. And United have currently what Ruben Amorim is working with is, it's a Eric Ten Hag heavy squad that absolutely failed and was assembled expensively. But there's also other players from different eras in there that are used to playing different systems. And it's it's such a difficult moment because United are in the Europa League, and maybe in a few months' time we can look back at this and just laugh at it. If United win the Europa League and then they can do the rebuild that they need to do, and everything does work out, maybe, but it seems a hell of a long way off. And Amorim knows. Like I'm going to speak in a second, just after this break, about what he said. I'm going to quote some of the things that he said today and talk about them, and talk about why he's saying them, because it's super important that at a time now where people are looking at Amorim's football and are thinking, this guy isn't up to it, the problems are so much deeper than him. He's had one transfer window where United didn't have any money. They cobbled some together and they signed one player. The rest of the players he's introduced have been youth players. It's not enough. And it's super important to know that he's going to be under pressure from the start of next season, because simply there are people that are out there saying that people are tolerating United being in 16th. It's not tolerant. It's not tolerating that at all. Especially in my case, it's not tolerating it. It's just understanding that you can shout and shout and shout about this not being good enough, but the only person, what's going to change? Like before fundamental change happens, what's going to change? So just taking a quick break, 1 second, and I'll come back to talk about some of the stuff that Amorim has said in his post-match press conference after losing 1-0 to West Ham on Sunday. Please remember to subscribe to the channel on Apple and Spotify if you've not done so already, also on YouTube as well, and follow me on social media at @_Scott Saunders. It's a difficult day because we've seen that happen, it's going to be a difficult couple of weeks. If United don't win the Europa League, I dread to think what is going to happen over the course of the summer. And maybe some of the fundamental change that will happen over the course of the summer is going to happen regardless of whether United win the Europa League. And I think that fundamental change is personnel. I've spoken numerous times about there being unpopular sales happening, thinking that was financial, but it might actually be cultural. It might be. Now, I understand that like not everybody listening to this is going to be fully understanding. That's completely the wrong way to put it. Fully tolerant of Ruben Amorim himself, and they're going to look at the situation and they're thinking, this is not good enough. Get him out. Let's get the next guy in. I'm not going to try and tell you how to feel, and I apologize if I said understanding there. That's completely the wrong word to say. I'm not going to try and tell you how to feel, but I'm going to try and convey how I feel, because I feel like the problems that we're seeing in this United team now are not Amorim's fault. And he's openly said before, he's not going to change. And it requires a bit of strength And it requires a strategy from the very top, implemented from the very top and seen through right to the very end in order for change to sustainably happen here. We're currently in purgatory. We're in the middle of United. Ruben Amorim, remember, wanted to come in at the end of this season and start fresh. United were the ones that said to him, you come now or the job's not yours and you probably will miss out on it. So he had a decision to make and he chose to come in knowing that probably the teething problems that he's having would happen. Because now he's in a position where there's a large chunk of people that are looking at him and thinking he's not fit for the job. And maybe he's already lost some of the players or whatever. Maybe people are looking at it and thinking that he knew that coming in with a clean break would have been the best approach for him. And maybe it would have been, but that was the decision that United made because they wanted to plan with a manager. And probably, looking at it, I've always said that I think it would be the right way that was the right way to go, because Ruben Amorim himself is now seeing the mess himself over a 6-month period or 8-month period or whatever it is. He's getting half a season plus to know every player, to know their strengths and their weaknesses, to know which ones he wants to carry on with, which ones he wants out, and what United have to do, what Jason Wilcock has to do, what Omar Barada has to do, what the people at the very top have to do is see through. They have to be completely aligned and see through this complete clear out and rebuild of this team. They have to do it. And they have to come in with United need a lot of players. They need a lot of players. And I'm not going to try and tell you how to feel, but I'm going to try and convey the problems and the depth of problems that United have and what Ruben Amorim and this current version of United's crop of transfer recruitment team and coaching team, what they're dealing with here. So I've already quoted this. There's a lack of urgency when we're defending our box. There's a lack of urgency when we are near the box. You can feel it at the beginning of the game. It's frustrating because we're so near the goals. We have such a lack of urgency to protect our goal. This is week by week. So he's saying this. This is happening every week. We don't play so well in the Europa League, but we have a different sense of urgency. And I said earlier, I've been talking and writing about the word urgency in relation to Manchester United and lack of urgency in relation to Manchester United since the days of Moyes and Louis van Gaal. That is how far back that goes. When have you seen United sustainably get on top and dominate matches? You haven't for a sustainable period. In order for your team, in order for good teams to emerge, and in order for teams to start winning leagues, which is what United should be doing, they need to dominate matches. They need to have authority over matches. And in order to do that, you need players who are able to do it. So United have really never recruited for that. Amorim has a different way of how he's going to do it. He needs players who are going to win one-on-ones, fight for every ball, run like dogs. I've said this already. And have good technical levels of ability in order to keep the ball and not lose the ball in silly positions or situations, like, for example, Harry Maguire did on Thursday night, conceding that goal against Athletic. It was a real, after that 4-1 win the other night, this was a real crash landing here and a reminder that these problems still exist. And Ruben Amorim went on to say, it's a decisive moment in the history of the club. We need to address that. It's a big problem because it's mentality. We're not scared of losing a game as Manchester United. We don't have that fear anymore. And that is the most dangerous thing that a big club can have. I think it's a concern. It's not the player's fault. It's my fault. I'm responsible. If we can't change that really fast, we should give our place to different people or persons. And he said in that the media is construing this as he's saying that if he can't change that, then he will go. He's not been afraid to hint at that kind of thing over the past few months. But what he's saying here, again, I've already touched on this point, but what he's saying here, massive change needs to happen this summer in terms of personnel, attitude. And United simply are not going to get out of this unless they see this period through. You could say you prefer a different manager to come in and get the best out of the players that he's got and change the system and then bring the best out of this group of players. How many times have we had managers who've come in that have tried to do that? What have they done in the end? They failed. Every single manager before this guy has failed. Everyone. What makes you feel? Is there a coach out there now that you feel would come in and maybe, of course, there would be plenty of coaches that could come in now. Even Gareth Southgate could probably come in now and get better, get Man United up into 6th or 7th place. Like not now because of how bad they've been in the table, but get better out of the current squad that they have. But how far will that take you? Do you think there's a manager out there now that can take this team and build them into champions? I don't, personally. I don't. Because I feel like there is so much fundamental change which needs to happen. And I've been saying this forever on this podcast. If you've been listening to it for a long time, been talking about this forever. It rears its head every time, every week. It's just the difference is today, Ruben Amorim has come out and said it all publicly. We need to address that. It's a big problem because it's mentality. I think it's a concern. It's not the player's fault. It's my fault. I'm responsible. If we can't change that really fast, we should give our place to different people. He's saying here massive change needs to happen in the summer. Whether he's talking about him, maybe he is talking about him. If he can't, and look, if he can't change, if we're seeing this at the start of next season and United haven't done enough changes and United are 17th or fighting relegation next season, of course Amorim's going to be up for the chop. Of course he is. He's calling out here for a summer of massive investment and change. And the only way that United are going to get massive investment is by selling players, really. That's why I've been talking about Bruno Fernandes potentially leaving. That's why I've been potentially talking about Garnacho potentially leaving. I don't want to see Kobbie Mainoo leave, but I look at him at the moment. I don't think he's a perfect, exact fit for what Ruben Amorim wants. Will he ever be that? I don't know. He's a ball-playing number 8 for me. United don't really have that position in this team, and that might be it's going to be super unpopular. But what would you prefer? Your favorite player to stay, or for the club to fix themselves? And it's a really unpopular thing to say. It's a difficult thing to stomach. It's a difficult thing to say. But honestly, like where do United turn after this? They have a plan. They have stated a plan. They want to see it through. Champions League qualification will help, of course, but I still think that there might be some sales, some big sales. Because you look at this team now and you think of like how does Ruben Amorim build a team of 11 of players that are fighters that run like dogs? You need at least 6 players coming in and starting. You need front foot centre backs. You need attacking wing backs. You need 10s who will press. You need midfielders who can do everything. How many United get in the summer, I don't know. But I mentioned 6 players there. What happens on your bench? Can you have Christian Eriksen coming off the bench knowing that he sticks out like a sore thumb because he just simply can't run? No. This will take transfer window upon transfer window and a lot of money and a lot of smart planning, a lot of really good profiling. A lot of these players whom will be Christopher Pavel is in charge of recruitment, remember. He has a track record of signing players for relatively cheap and bringing them on and they turn into 60-odd million players, 70-odd million players. I don't have the money simply to go and spend 80 million or 60 million on every position. They have to be smart about it. They have to bring players in who you maybe haven't heard of, who fit the bill. You have to see it through for me. Think of all those reports that we've had over the course of the season of United are willing to sell everyone. No player is safe. Financial reasons, yes, but also probably cultural. Because this is a squad of players that, like, how many players outside of Bruno Fernandes, how many players have come in and joined Manchester United and got better? None. Look at Anthony now. He's gone out to Betis and is flying, scoring 30-yard goals every 5 minutes for Betis. Marcus Rashford went to Aston Villa. Whatever you think about the attitude that Rashford showed at United, he's probably had enough. There's a malaise at Manchester United, which has come down from the very top, that from the very top they're trying to change. You can't do that in 6 months. United tried to implement some change last summer. They made some signings, some of whom have been okay. But then they made those signings for a manager that they ended up sacking after 9 games. And yeah, that reflects terribly on them, but they've now made the decision with one of the brightest young coaches in Europe. They made the decision to bring him in, and by all intents and purposes, they're probably going to see it through. Or they need to see it through. They absolutely have to, because there's a culture there. I can't express how long I've been talking about cultural problems at Manchester United, and so many people have. It's not as simple as just one guy can come in and change it in 6 months signing one player. It's just not that. What needs to change is the standards. And I've seen plenty of people asking today, like, what makes you think that Ruben Amorim is the guy that can do it? Well, he's been at other clubs. Sporting were an absolute mess when he went in there. He had one summer where he cleaned them out completely, got rid of a ton of players, brought some other players in, made it his team, changed the attitude completely. They won the league. And yes, it's a much smaller scale, and that's going to be nigh on impossible to do the same thing with Man United in that time scale. It is impossible. Never going to happen. But he needs players who are going to buy into every single word that he says, run every single yard like it was life or death, go into every 1v1 like it's life or death, run backwards like it's life or death. It is so, so important that the club follow through with this plan in the summer. There are so many players, and simply put, you can't really do that with 2 or 3 signings. You can't. It's going to have to be. You're looking at 6, really. Whether United end up doing that, I don't know. If they sign any less than that, I fear for this team. I fear for Amorim. But they're going to have to be clever. They're going to have to sign some really established players, but also some players who are really talented, maybe smaller profile, a lot less expensive gems that they've just plucked out of nowhere that are going to come in and lift the physical level of this team and the technical level of this team. We need to change things. Only us can change things. We are missing that feeling of urgency, and it's something which is hard to explain. Everybody's focused on the final. The final is not the biggest thing in our football club. We need to change a lot of things. If we don't change the way we play and perform and feel this urgency of winning every game, we should not play in the Champions League. We should just stay in the Premier League and learn how to be competitive 1 week at a time. The biggest focus on our football club is to change a lot of things. It's not just the final. We're going to face a team from the Premier League, so we're going to struggle. And he's right, because United have played every game in Europe so far, knowing that the physical differences. And Tottenham have beaten United for 3 consecutive matches, remember. Tottenham, especially in the early days under Ange, shown that they're physically levels above United. So I'm not even convinced that United are going to win this game. I think United's previous tournament experience of winning finals and winning in big matches could maybe work in their favor, going with Tottenham's thing of never winning or haven't won a Premier League or a trophy in 17 years or whatever it is. But looking at recent history and player for player and style of play, Tottenham have the edge at the moment. And Amorim's saying here, we need to change a lot of things, and we need to feel this urgency of winning every game. We should not play in the Champions League if we don't have that. We should stay in the Premier League and learn how to be competitive 1 week at a time. And maybe it is, look, United need to win the Europa League. They do. It would do them a hell of a lot of good. But the idea shouldn't really change whether they win it or not. Amorim's essentially saying there that, and I've thought this at times as well, and there clubs like Chelsea specifically have shown in the past that this can be of benefit to them when they need to change things. I think it was in the Conte season. Chelsea ended up winning the league. I don't think they were in Europe at that time in 2017, I think it was. We all know how important it is for United to get into the Champions League financially. But I don't think if they get in that they can afford to deviate from the plan. And if they don't win the Europa League, there is a world where you can look at it and there are silver linings with it. As bad as it, like, I'm not saying for a second that I don't want United to win the Europa League, but I'm just saying on the other side of things, for Ruben Amorim to get his message across, he would have a full preseason. He would weed out the players that don't want to be there because they want to play in Europe. Might make them easier to sell. They might have to ask for less money because simply United won't be in a position to demand big money. We'll also give him one game a week to get his ideas across. And knowing how hard Ruben Amorim wants his team to play, how hard he wants them to run, he's saying there, we should just stay in the Premier League and learn how to be competitive 1 week at a time. That is mad. It's a mad thing to say, but there's also some merit in it. And of course, United should win the Europa League, and every single person should want United to win the Europa League. And I want United to win the Europa League. Of course I do. But losing it would require a full reset, which I think United need. So, look, it's difficult, and I understand that there's a lot of people that are starting to look at Ruben Amorim now and are thinking he's not up to the task. But hopefully, you've listened to that. If you're on that side of the boat, if you're on that side of the fence, hopefully something I've said here has resonated. Maybe it hasn't changed your mind or whatever. People are entitled to feel how the way that they want to feel. It's completely fine. And people are split on it completely. And I understand why, but I just think it's so important at a time like this to point out how important it is and how vital it is that United look at the problems that have been holding them back for 10 to 12 years culturally and address them, because I think that cultural malaise shows up in everything that United do. It stems from the top, but every single player, bar Bruno Fernandes, that has joined Manchester United, maybe Zlatan Ibrahimovic as well, every single player that's joined United over the past decade or so has come in and got worse and left and got better. That screams to me that there's some kind of standards have slipped. And I think I tailed off in a sentence I was saying earlier about what makes you think Ruben Amorim is the guy to change that. I said he'd been through at Sporting and done that. But also look at everything that he says. Look at his motivations. Look at what he wants to achieve. And look at how annoyed he's getting. A player's not following his basic instructions. Look at how he's talking about, if I can't change this, I'm out. United need to stick with a guy as passionate as this. Because you can tell, just by looking at the team, that he is not happy with what the team are doing. That's why he's calling for changes. Anyway, it's been the Promise Land podcast from me, Scott Saunders. I'll be back early this week, I would imagine, because there's going to be probably a lot of fallout out of this. United play Friday against Chelsea. And you just know that the media is going to run away with this. And look, United 16th is just not good enough. I'm not saying it's good enough, but I'm trying to get across here the circumstances which are outside of Ruben Amorim's control that have led United to this position. He is not the only manager to fail with this team. He's just failing a hell of a lot worse, because he's trying to do it his way. And I think for once, the club doing it their way and the club having a complete alignment alongside a manager working towards a plan is the absolute best way to go. So I don't think United are winning the Premier League again this season, but fingers crossed they can win the Europa League. And we'll see what comes out of it. But get in touch with me, Scott Saunders, or at @Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Also, get in the comments as well, because I'd love to hear what you think about this. And Subscribe on Apple and Spotify and on YouTube as well. It's been the Promising Podcast with me, Scott Saunders. Until next time, everyone, another day, another loss in the Premier League. Till next time, thanks for listening. See you soon.